Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you here today, talking about UFC 200 with the big Brock Lesnar versus Mark Hunt. There's gonna be a lot of people out there making videos talking about UFC 200, Brock Lesnar versus Mike Hunt, and it is what it is. Those are the people that you'd be able to find out who the real UFC fans are. I can remember seeing Mark Hunt fight on a fight night a few months ago, where he actually took out one of Brock Lesnar's biggest rivals, Frank Mir. Of course, Frank Mir is the guy who beat Brock Lesnar in his first UFC bout. That, of course, Brock Lesnar came back in the rematch and was able to beat Mir. A lot of the loss that Brock took to Mir in the first one was not being able to fight off submissions, which is with a lot of new heavyweights. One of the biggest things for them to learn is be able to fight off submissions. That's actually one thing that in Mark Hunt's career that he's had to get better at. Now, he's able to drop down to the mat. He is able to get a submission here or there. I would say that it's not his biggest strength to his fighting style, but it is a part of everyone's game these days, and we're gonna have to see what it is. The biggest surprise that will be coming out is to see how Brock Lesnar is really going to take this fight. There's a part of me in my gut that I can feel that Brock Lesnar is mainly taking this fight because of the fact that because of everything that's happened in UFC over this last year, whether that's their two biggest draws, Ronda Rousey and Conor McGregor, both taking losses, that UFC is in sort of a desperate need for big names. Brock Lesnar, of course, the face of the first video game for UFC. He was the heavyweight champion. He sort of was the poster boy of UFC for a while. He's probably the biggest name that they've had return to UFC in the last few years. We've seen guys like Rampage Jackson come from the past and sort of show up to have these sort of like superstar, almost legend fights, I guess you can say, which is the one thing that Bellator is really drawn with, that I think UFC has sort of looked at, is that, they've always gone with sort of a ranking system to lead towards big championship fights. But I think they realize that if there are real sort of dream fights, or if there are real sort of rivalries, they can, be big boosts to pay-per-view, that people actually want to pay to see big names that they've seen from back in the day. Definitely, from about 2005 to maybe around 2010, UFC was riding a tidal wave of popularity with a lot of people, and since then, whether if it's them expanding to having more shows, them getting a television contract, it seems like UFC is pushing almost every show, whether if it's a pay-per-view this weekend or next weekend. How many times have you seen UFC have pay-per-views 3 out of 4 weeks in a month? Who's going to be able to afford to keep up with everything that's going down like that? When UFC was riding its crest, they were basically riding under the WWE's successful wave of a pay-per-view a month, where if you were a fan, you could follow, and even though you knew that pay-per-view was going to cost you $40 to $50, that on top of your normal cable bill, you were going to be able to afford it yet once it comes. So they put big matches on Fox Sports. They put big matches on regular basic Fox. They make every fight, every show seem like it's the must-win. And then even now, with them having their own sort of Fight Pass, their sort of network online, a lot like the WWE network, even those shows they try to push as being big shows that you don't have to miss as well. And they're almost getting into the same spot that WWE is in, where basically how much time do you really have to devote to a sport? And you can see that I think UFC is still there in popularity with WWE, and people still thinking that it's pop culture being covered by SportsCenter and things like that. But there's a lot of it that people sort of look at a card and they just say, I can miss that one. I'll make sure that I check out the next one. There's not packed houses. Well, there's shows are packed, but people aren't packing out Buffalo Wild Wings or TGI Fridays or Hooters like they were back in the day. But I was listening to Wrestling Observer. There's a lot of talk about what went down to make Vince McMahon sign off on Brock Lesnar going and fighting for UFC one more time at UFC 200. Some people think that it's a talent exchange. Some people think that it's Brock holding Vince's feet to the fire, basically saying that he would quit and walk out on WWE if they did not give him this offer. Brock knows that there's a lot of money to be made, and Brock's saying the right things, that basically he needs to do this because of the fact that he doesn't feel like when he retired that he really should have retired. He doesn't want to be sitting on the couch years from now wondering what would have happened if he would have gave it one more chance after taking that loss. So and there's also talk on Wrestling Observer today saying that basically was Vince McMahon hoodwinked by UFC. Basically, when you look at Mark Hunt's stats, if you've never seen this guy fight, he's an overweight 42-year-old guy. I can't remember if he comes from Australia or New Zealand, but he comes from that part of the world. And he's got a record of 12-10. He is coming off, back-to-back wins. He beat Silva, he beat Mir. Before that, he did lose his last 2 fights. But this guy, you can tell, is sort of a UFC lifer, even though there's sort of like this. There's not a rule, but I mean, there's always been sort of like a guideline of, should people be fighting over the age of 40, and here he is at age 42. He just signed a 6-fight deal with UFC, so UFC is sort of thinking that this guy is something that they can build around. He does have a big, he does have a following around him as a guy that people have seen him fight through different fighting organizations before leading himself to UFC. He is sort of a popular guy. I like the fact that they had a big fight last year of 2 guys going at it in the ring, just 2 big dudes, and it was, you knew that the fight was going to be over in the first round. People were just looking to see a big knockout, and when you put him in the ring, that's what people think of. I'm a little bit surprised. I know that Brock has been out of UFC for the past, how many years? 29, 30, 31, 32. He's been out of the UFC for 4 to 5 years now. He is coming in as the underdog. If you were going to go Vegas and you were to bet on this fight, Brock Lesnar would make you money. If you're thinking that he's going to win, and you could lay some money down on that. To me, honestly, I think Brock's a beast, and Brock represents WWE. He represents, wrestling fans, even though I don't think he really is one of us. But that was one of my big drawing points of that when Brock was champion. People who watched UFC would always, say how wrestling is fake and how can you follow this? And my response was, I like wrestling because wrestling has a reason for 2 guys going into the ring and having a match. UFC to me is almost like blood sport, where basically it's just 2 guys going into the octagon to see who's the biggest and the baddest, but they're not doing it for pride, they're doing it for money. And even though, with wrestling, 2 guys might be having a match because one guy stole his leather jacket, or, some stupid, like the WrestleMania thing with Edge and Booker T, where Booker T stole Edge's shampoo commercial in Japan. At least you have a reason that these guys are going out there and having a match, and it is what it is. But I think that this is going to be a big fight, and even though it's not going to be the main event, there's 3 championship matches, and this looks like it might be billed as the number 2 co-main event. It could really fall anywhere on UFC, but UFC really knocked one out of the park by being able to get Brock to come there. I don't think Brock. I think he's going to train. But I don't think Brock is going into this as serious as I think people want him to, that he's just going to go in and try and land that first big knockout punch. Obviously, somebody doesn't want to go into the octagon, no matter how much money it's going to be, and just get their ass kicked and collect a check at the end of the day. Obviously, he wouldn't do this if he didn't think he had a chance to win, but there's also a big part of me that thinks that Brock knows that he's got a huge check coming his way, one way or the other at the end of this show, and I think that's why he's doing it. And I'm not calling him a sellout. I'd take the money if they offered it to me. Dana, give me a call. I'll open up the DMs. You can send it on in there. But I don't know, man. I mean, it's definitely going to be weird. Brock Lesnar will always be Brock Lesnar to WWE, but it's not like you're going to be able to get that out of the people's minds. If he walks into the octagon, walks into the center, and Mark Hunt knocks him out with that first punch and he goes down, how do you build this guy up like a monster if you guys are planning on having him face Roman Reigns at SummerSlam or Roman Reigns at WrestleMania, and you want this to be sort of like the torch passing match of, Roman beat Triple H. He's a 3-time champion. He's held the belt for however so long. If you want to have him hold it the whole year, and you want to replay Brock versus Roman from WrestleMania 31 at WrestleMania 33, because of the fact that you want Roman to be able to make up for the time that he should have won the championship, but it was the cash in by Seth Rollins that kept him out. I mean, that's the story that I would tell if I was trying to push Roman Reigns. But, there's a lot of people who watch wrestling who don't watch UFC. But for the people who do, how do you sort of erase that from our minds?